It's almost been an entire month since the Nintendo Switch 2 released, and if I learned one thing about the Nintendo Switch 1 is that playing with the Joy-Cons is definitely not the move. So on day one, I went out and I also bought a Switch 2 Pro controller, and if there's one thing for sure, Nintendo is certainly not giving these things away. So in today's video, I'm going to be comparing what makes these two controllers different from one another, and also to see if it's even worth buying to begin with. To start off, let's start by looking at the presentation of the controllers, because even though at first glance they do look identical, if you do take a closer look, you will realize that they are. Here's the thing, I completely understand, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because the Pro Controller for the Nintendo Switch 1 is very comfortable to hold. I don't think many people have many problems with it, but the one thing I do slightly have an issue with is it's still not their best controller. In my opinion, this one was a whole lot more comfortable to hold. And again, especially for the price, it wouldn't have hurt to just slightly modify the design, because I wouldn't say that the Pro Controller for the Nintendo Switch 1 was absolutely perfect. But there is a couple very slight minor details that do separate both controllers apart. For example, if you look at the top of the controller, you'll notice that there is a new color scheme. But not only that, they also removed the old gloss, to which in my opinion is a fantastic move because they just end up scratching anyways. And plus, they're always filled with fingerprints. Additionally, the player lights that used to be at the bottom of the Pro Controller are now at the top. And the final major detail I would say is the texture of the controller. Because by all means, the original Pro Controller didn't feel cheap, but the Switch 2 Pro Controller just feels so much more luxurious. Like, this controller is just unnecessarily soft, and I love it. Trust me, I absolutely do, but the only question I have is I wonder how long this soft coating is going to last. Now it's time to talk about debatably the most important part of any new controller, and that is its functionalities. And right off the bat, probably the biggest addition to these new controllers are the GL and GR back paddles. These are buttons that are programmable within the controller settings, and I'm going to be honest with you, I never even bothered to use them because I don't think it's something I need to be using right now. Maybe later on when there's more games that come out, I will. For me, it's kind of a null feature, but maybe you will use it more than I do, who knows. But one really cool thing about these back paddles though is when you do end up programming them, you can actually do this on a per game basis. So basically, if you want the GL and GR back paddles to do one thing in Mario Kart and maybe something else in Donkey Kong Bonanza, you can actually program it for it to be different depending on the game. Another new feature they added to the Switch 2 Pro Controller is a new headphone jack, which is handy when you're doing game chat because then you can just kind of connect your controller directly to some headphones. But speaking of game chat, they also added a new button to the face of the controller, which is the C button, to which personally I have never used so far because none of my friends have a Switch 2, nor will we actually use it once they do end up buying one. But personally, I think the number one thing they did differently with the Pro 2 controller is how incredibly buttery smooth these joysticks are. It's literally unbelievable. Also, in terms of battery life, both controllers last about the same amount of time. The only difference that I've noticed is that the Pro 2 controller is going to be charging a little bit faster. Not that it was a huge problem in my opinion at least. However, it is nice that it does charge faster. Now, I work in marketing, so I know exactly why Nintendo did this. So every time you want to move somebody over to the new shiny product, so in Nintendo's case, you know, moving from the Pro 1 controller to the Pro 2, they need to have at least one thing that is slightly annoying, just enough, to make people want to buy the new one. And in this case, it's the home button. Most people probably know by now that if you're playing your Switch 1 with your Switch 1 controller and you press the home button and your TV's off and the Switch is off, it'll turn everything on. But here's the thing. If you have a Switch 2 Pro controller, you can do the same thing with your Switch 2. However, you can't wake up your Switch 2 with a Pro 1 controller, which is so annoying, but I understand. Now, before we move on to my final thoughts on the Switch 2 Pro controller, I have a very short message. If this is your first time here, Hey, my name's Acadrien, and I post weekly Nintendo videos just like this. So if that sounds like something you would enjoy, I would greatly appreciate it if you would simply consider to like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's go right back into the video. So here comes the interesting part. Do I recommend buying a Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller? And I think the answer is a little everywhere, if I have to be honest, because I do genuinely really enjoy this controller. I love how soft it is to touch. It's really a satisfying thing to hold. I also really enjoy how buttery smooth the joysticks are. But at the end of the day, if you are willing to stand up for literally just 2 seconds to walk over and just press the button to start your Switch, I think you can probably save a bunch of money. I mean, hey, if you want, you can also bring a Joy-Con, like the Switch 2 Joy-Con, with you to the couch, and you can start it remotely with just that. But yeah, although I absolutely adore my Switch 2 Pro controller, I do think for most people, especially people that already owns the Switch 1 Pro controller, you can probably skip out, or at least hold off until the one you do own breaks. And now it's time for me to turn the video back to you. Considering you're watching this video, I'm guessing you don't own a Switch 2 Pro controller, so the question of the video will be, do you think you'll get a Switch 2 Pro controller? Let me know down in the comments. I would once again like to thank you for watching the video all the way to the end, and if you did enjoy this video, why not check out another one? For whatever reason, YouTube thinks that you'll enjoy this one, so try checking out that one next. And until next time, Wad out.